All right, here's another poll for you guys because we are going to now move into culture and community.
Okay, so I'm going to relaunch the poll.
Yes, please.
Okay, it started. Can you ask us the question again, Betsat?
Yes, please. It is, which image appeals to you?
Does it matter, Bezat, how? Like, with what perspective?
Sure. As nonprofits, as organizations that work with culture and with communities, oftentimes you need to portray all sorts of issues that relate to human beings. And so if you were to see any of these images, which one would call out to you, and why? We can also have a little discussion just on the why part too, because that might be interesting.
Yeah, that'll be great. By the way, while the polling is going on, Bezat, there's a very interesting discussion that's initiated with that suggestion of the picture. I think Matt had a very interesting point where he's saying that at SLT, we have used such images of picture of a snow leopard with livestock in the context describing the problem of predation. And I found them to be quite powerful to convey this point, but that's an entirely different thing to use such as an image in an advertisement for snow leopard photo tour. So I think context becomes extremely valuable in that sense. How are you putting forward that image, right? And for what?
Absolutely. And so for a lot of we work with a lot of production crews from various channels and crews and film productions. And what we have noticed is oftentimes the cameramen themselves or the camerawomen will stop filming if there is a domestic animal in the picture, because they have to uphold, they cannot be accused of baiting either. And then anything they film will be unusable with that particular animal. And so we follow the same thing. If we don't have it, we cannot use it. And so for me, I have images of them, but they're just documentary. They're more like evidence that, oh, look, another kill, and less like this is a useful thing to be able to tell a story for our context. But I get Matt's point entirely. It is a powerful image to be able to show what damage something like that can do. So, all right, polls in. I'm surprised by these results. The image number 1, which is a powerful image of a drought-affected area, got the most votes, 38%. Image 2 of these 2 Rajasthani men, which I took, got 8%, 1 vote. Image 3 shows a sad farmer. It's connected to farmer suicides, 3 votes. And the last one, a little girl carrying water from clearly a not very good water source, got 4. And so I would love to also hear from people what, and you can turn your mics on or you can type in chat, why these images appeal to you, and like what emotion they got out of you. Any comments, guys? Why, what appeals? Or we can move on. Scarcity and perseverance. Empathy, sorrow, sadness. 1, because you can really feel the heartbreak. He's there with his gardening tool, but there is nothing growing. chose 4 and I felt sadness that we're still in a world where this child has to work like this. I would rather see her at school. Expression, image 3, expression on the farmer's face, call for help and appeal to a higher power seemed universal and relatable. Choice again depends, Matt says, very much on the story I'm trying to tell. If I write about drought, number 1's a good choice. If it's about access to water, it would be number 4. If I'm talking about a more positive, uplifting story, number 2 would be much more powerful. 1, because it captures the desperation and helplessness of the situation, and then unable to foresee the future on the land because the ecosystem collapsed. All really powerful points. So I'll end the whiteboardy part and go back to the presentation now. Basically, sorry. I chose 4 images, which all showed people in a sort of similar place, in similar circumstances, and probably at a similar income level. The types of images you often see of communities across the developing parts of the world are categorized by a lot of nonprofit and sort of social photographers as what's called poverty porn. They are oftentimes heart-wrenching images, which really give you an emotional connect, a very quick understanding of what's happening, how it's going, and what the problem might be. Basically, an image that will translate the headline immediately. There have been studies that have been done that have compared the very same people photographed. So a mother and daughter, I think in Ghana, were photographed looking poor, basically in their work clothes, in their farming clothes, in their clothes that get dirty, and were shot top down, looking down at them. Sorry, I didn't include that, I should have, but I'll just describe it. And then the very same people, the mother and daughter, were portrayed in good-looking clothes, smiling and looking at the camera. Studies have basically shown that while the first image of will have great emotional appeal and will solicit a one-time donation, the second image will actually inspire also more empathy and respect, and will actually allow you to see this person as your equal. Because as donors, you are not in this position. You are not looking upwards. With basically 3 of these images inspire pity, right? And that is why they're powerful, because they have this immediate emotional, visceral reaction. But what they do not inspire, according to studies, is long-term continuation of donations. These are all sort of, there's an earthquake, we need to donate sort of responses. They're not, we need to take care of snow leopards over the next 20 years responses. And there is no right answer in which image you should use. So that often then comes down to the editor's job and the storyteller's job. And so really all of you are correct. Whatever image appeals to you, appeal to you. For context, since we are dealing with wildlife and we are dealing with community, and because you are also, in many instances, the partner that the community trusts to help address, we look at everything that we do in our conservation space as needing community support for. There's nothing we can do without it. If we want to tackle human-wildlife conflict, I don't have any sheep. I'm not solving my issue. And I'm pretty sure none of you have any sheep. But for our community partners who do have sheep, the snow leopard is viewed very, very differently. They also viewed themselves perhaps the same way you view yourself. How, if you were to be photographed, which of these photographs would you like to be in? Would be a different way to ask this question. If you were to be portrayed in the New York Times tomorrow as someone who had a drought problem or a water problem or a financial hardship, which of these pictures of yourself would you like to see accompanying the headline? So we come back then to the ethics of portraying other human beings. for me, I'm a photographer, and so the artfulness of the image matters, but also the respect that the person being photographed feels for themselves matters. And so, because we work in these areas where culture is strong, where heritage is a very important part of people's own understanding of their traditions, of their culture, of their place in society, we often think of how to combine those elements. How can it be a beautiful image? How can it be an image that the person who is the subject of is also proud of? And how can it actually connect with the issue at hand? How can it contribute positively to the story? How can it also invoke positive emotions, emotions of empathy and respect and connection on a much more human level? So this is also, just to go back, this is a hunter in who has golden eagles, which he uses to hunt. He's wearing both fox and wolf in this picture. But of course, you need to work with hunters if conservation is important. And so this is a very important aspect of culture, of tradition, of pride, of self-respect, and of community respect. In this case, this lady is from the Bakarwal community in Kashmir. We're in her tent. We're learning about depredation, mostly from bears. And we're doing a portrait, which we gave her a print of as well. So for me, and this is again my context as a photographer, which is what I can speak to in this instance. So for me, images should evoke empathy and respect, and they need to build a human to human level connection, right? You feel connection with this lady, but you can also see that she is in a life that is much more difficult than yours. But that doesn't mean she needs to be joyless. That doesn't mean you're not showing the tent, you're not showing the wear in her eyes. And so if you look towards shocking and jarring images of poverty that basically just show an emergency situation, which basically say, for 6 cents a day, you can feed this starving child, you are going to evoke very strong reactions for a very short period of time. Most people will not want to remember that image. They will not want to think of it every time they're having breakfast. They are not going to want to connect with that image long term. They're going to see it, they're going to understand it, and they're going to walk on. For most humans, you need something that has a deeper connection. And so you need to put yourself in the shoes of your community partners. How would you want to be photographed? And so, we've been working across multiple communities across, the majority of our work is in super rural areas. And every place we go, the people are unique. Their cultures are all very isolated, very small. There aren't that many of each of those people. And so they're always interested in telling their story and telling what it feels like to be a human in their part of the planet. And so in order to tell powerful community stories, you need to engage with the community as equals. And that is what your photography should show of this. If you're looking down, if you're showing poverty, if you're basically putting your community at a level that is lower than the reader, there will be a long-term sustainable relationship between your donors or your fundraisers or your tourists and the community. If you show them as equals, as equally respected as someone that you can sort of imagine being born in this position as, then you have a starting point. Sure, they might have issues that need cash to be solved, but then your viewer might actually be more open to having a much more longer term relationship with a community they understand a little bit more of, that they respect more, that they aren't just viewing as someone to be pitied. So this is the man on the left is from a village in Hemis National Park. The lady in the middle is on the Wakhan, on the Panj River, Tajikistan and Afghanistan. The boy on the right is from small community called the Aryan community on the western part of Ladakh, and they have these elaborate, beautiful headdresses that are part of their identity. This is a man in the Wakhan in Gorno Badakhshan in Tajikistan. They were celebrating the Aga Khan's birthday. And so for all of these portraits, I always, before the camera ever comes out of my bag, we're having tea, we're having conversations, we're exchanging stories of connection. I'm telling them why I'm there. They're telling me about their life. And all of these things happen before. And so there is a very clear connection between photographer and subject. And all of you have this opportunity because all of you work with communities that know you really well. So you can, in fact, have them be comfortable in front of a camera if you're hiring a photographer, or if you're working with a photographer, or if you're taking these pictures yourself. There's no reason for there to not be a strong emotional connect between you and your subject, because only then can you build a stronger story. Only then can you actually receive from them the sort of information you need to tell a strong story to the next people you're looking at, your audience. This is a nomad in the Changthang who had actually also suffered some depredations and was telling us about that. But then, we became friends. We were on like our fifth cup of tea when eventually we started taking pictures, and he was just pleased to have his pictures taken. So we could take him outside. We could put him with the corpses of his sheep and goats, but then that'd be a very different story. And it would have, for a lot of people, like I think of my own family members, they would see a bunch of dead sheep and they're like, oh, wow, too graphic, next. And they just sort of go past without even wanting to read what it was because it's too jarring. Another lady, this time in Nubra, no depredations. We were just walking by their house and they invited us in for tea. And so telling a different story, but one of openness, of hospitality, of warmth, of welcoming, but also at the same time showing the difficult life, of showing how hard it can be at living at 3,000 meters above sea level, of farming your whole life, of being exposed to the sun at these altitudes, but yet having joy in your eyes, right? So it's a much more human connection. This is a monk in the Hemis monastery. This is another Bakarwal lady. She was, we had actually a great conversation. We were laughing and joking. We're in their tent. You can see the people sort of outside their tent. You can see her granddaughters. You can see the fireplace in the back. Over here, as soon as we started talking about bears, this was her reaction. And so I've got pictures that go before this where she's laughing and smiling and, her eyes are smiling. And then as soon as we started talking about bears, and we've got Himalayan brown bears in this region, this was her emotion. And that is how she feels about bears. And so it's another strong story. It gives context. It shows family. It shows the difficulty of life. Obviously some of these images are more artsy than documentary, since that's my style. But when woven in with other images in a sequence, they tell a story that is deeper than simply showing the picture of a bear or simply showing the picture of this lady standing over a dead sheep. It creates human connect. This is the sort of imagery, if it's good enough for high-end fashion to use really great photography to sell perfume, why should nonprofits not use really high-end imagery of like a New York Times caliber to tell this story of pain, right? Because that is what human wildlife conflict is. It's pain, and we're trying to address this pain. So it's important to sort of look at it from all perspectives. You don't need everyone laughing or joking in a picture, but it doesn't mean that the picture cannot be a strong one with emotion, without demeaning the person that is in that picture, without making them appear poor, without making them an object of pity. So I always like to introduce respect in that. As a scarf seller on the Afghan border in Tajikistan, we became great friends, and he had a pet goat. So how can you portray the community? What are some, I'm sure everyone's got thoughts, because, we all like taking pictures. We all like having our pictures taken. And so, what do you guys feel? Give me your thoughts on how can you portray the community? Costa, we'll need a whiteboard again.
Yes,
please.
sir. Coming on its way. Hey, by the way, before we move on, I just want to shout out what an absolute visual delight this presentation of yours has been. Good Lord. I mean, yes, your snow leopard pictures were stunning, but these human pictures, woof, awesome. Absolutely awesome. Thanks, Vezat, for sharing these, really. Sorry, side
My
note, but
pleasure.
let's get back to work. Sorry, I just couldn't resist mentioning that. Really, really, truly special pictures. Thanks. Yep. So what's the question? Sorry.
How can you portray the community? How should you? What would you, and you can give specific examples of communities you work with and the images they have, and then maybe just sort of think through how you might take this and apply it to them.
So does this question suffice what we are trying to look for, Bezat?
It does.
Okay, perfect. So here's the question, looking for answers.
I don't know if Matt, can you share how in the past with SLT you've tried what your narrative has been? I'd be interested to hear.
Sure, I can speak about that for a short while. I think it has evolved as well. When I first started in this job, I didn't have much of a notion of what these communities are, and also not much of a notion of how to ethically portray them. I think you develop these skills as you go, thanks to sessions like this one by Bezat we've just heard. And I think what we tried to do, at least in the later years when there was more of an awareness about these things, was exactly to show community members not as, we always talk about the local community, but that doesn't really mean anything. And what I think what is a good approach is to try to show individuals. They're not just a goat herder in Ladakh, they're a person. And that sort of distinction tends to fall away a little bit in how nonprofits communicate around these issues. And I think the more we can show them as people, who have their own sense of humor, who have their own problems, even if some of them might be shared among other members of that community, the more that sort of empathy can be created for what it actually means to them to lose 10 goats in an attack by a snow leopard, or to struggle to send their kids to school, or whatever the issue may be. So yeah, like moving away from the idea of the local community and towards people with dignity and a personal story, I think is a good approach.
Sybil, maybe if I may request you, because you had another very good point, and if I can just say it on your behalf, but maybe you can explain it further. So Bezat, Sybil's asking, one, she says, great presentation, so many deep questions. Please talk a little more about how you share your images with the communities you visit. And I think that's also an important point. I'm not sure, were you about to come to that later, in which case we can wait. But if not, then yeah, this could be a good time.
Also, if I can just jump in, Kostub, I think the question or the point raised by Chemi, that there's a thin line between appreciation and appropriation, is one that might merit some more discussion. I will be very curious to hear more on that from people.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So for Sybil's point, can you guys see my screen?
No, everyone's seeing my screen right now. Sorry.
Okay.
Let me stop sharing.
Okay.
Hold on. There we go. Over to you.
So one of the things we do, so I've been working on this project for a while called Nomad Studio, where basically, because I take pictures of snow leopards, but really portraits are my favorite, but just because of the human element and connecting to people and learning their stories. And so what we do is we often revisit the same communities over and over, but basically staying with different people and engaging with different people. But every time we return, we bring back prints. And so the idea with prints, especially for the Champa community in Ladakh, is that these prints are for the elders in the community. They are their only formal representation that their children will inherit. They have never really had their image taken, except for the style that you will find on a driver's license or an ID or a passport photo. That is the extent of the photographs they have of themselves, and their kids will have to remember them. So many of these portraits I take are actually then framed, given back to them. We just print them in lei, frame them in lei, take them back the next time we visit. Basically, we stop at the first tent and chat with them, and then realize whether this is a group of nomads we have visited before or we have not. If we visit them, we will actually very quickly we'll just show the first picture we can get our hands on and say, hey, do you know where so-and-so is? And they'd be like, oh yeah, he's in the fourth tent down over there. And then so we'll go over and we'll hand them their pictures, and it is just absolutely fantastic. So this lady that you see on the left over here, I've met her 4 times over the last 6 years. And every time she has given me the story of her life. And her husband died 30 years ago. And I think she's either 91 or 92. And her only regret is that she is still here and her husband is not. And she's like, I'm still here. And it's just, life is hard. It's, my knees hurt, all these issues. And then you basically begin building this bond with your subjects and actually feel this pain. And so this is something that we share, which I share through these pictures. And then I'll stop screen sharing, and then Costa, you can restart your whiteboard. But one of the other things then is, at what point is it tokenism? Or at what point is it representing, what was the other point about culture?
Appropriation, I think.
Appropriation. So, I mean, I'm not sure if appropriation applies, because it perhaps apply if it was my portrait with me wearing their clothes. But for them, for the nomads, what we do is we say we will take a portrait and we will bring you back a print. Then they decide what they're going to dress up as. We don't get them to dress up. So this is the print they want. This is the image they want to be remembered by. So most nomads, especially in Buddhist Ladakh, will actually head straight for one of their nicer robes, which they will wear to the monastery on special days, and they will head for their prayer wheel or their prayer beads, because they want to be remembered as someone who was pious. They want to be remembered as someone who basically tried to acquire merit and good karma. And so this is how they want to be seen. And so it is, in one point, if we were doing a fashion shoot, then I would have the ability to direct. In another instance, when we are actually asking them how they want to be portrayed, this is how they would like to be portrayed. Everyone does want to look good. So it's always an interesting point for me as well, because I do see a lot of images from really famous photographers that are there's a level of production. All of this has a high level of production. My images, we have studio lights, we have backdrops, we have all these things. So we're going there with the intent to create beautiful portraits. We're not going there with the intent to document them sitting around not looking good, right? And so we document them with their sheep, with their goats, with their way around town. And those are all great images, but we're still working in great light. We're working in a way that still makes them look good, doing a difficult job. So it's always about respect in an image for me. And so, yes, you can run into issues of appropriation, especially if you are directing how the end image needs to come out. The trouble with that is that if you go out into the field looking to tell a story that you have created yourself, that is when there's a break between telling someone else's story and then just actually finding content to fill holes in your story, right? And so then that comes back to this point about ethics and honesty. And you need to document what is there and not create a second thing in your with your perspective, right?
Mhm. Yeah, makes sense, Bezat. Thank you. There's some very nice points which are coming through. I'm trying to read through the messages. Yeah, such an excellent team we have here. Wonderful suggestions.
You know, I saw Fatima had a question. Have you ever considered leaving one camera with the communities and come back to see what they would do with it? We did a little experiment with I'm trying to remember what the name is. It's a little Kodak camera which prints the images out right away, like a Polaroid, but not quite a Polaroid, and really fun. So one of our guests had actually bought 2 or 3 of these, and we handed them out in a few different villages, which we knew we would be returning back through, and we gave them all to kids. And so it was actually tons of fun when they all took pictures of each other. And this has been done on a better scale somewhere else in India. And I think it is a fantastic thing and should definitely be done, especially if you can hand out these kind of cameras to the community, have them document their own lives. And that'll be so much more authentic than us. And so, you know, my pictures aren't supposed to be the only way, right? I'm only showing what I find is a respectful way with my portraiture to tell a story. So of course with art it differs, but in terms of documentation, there's nothing better than having the community also be a part of telling their own story.